in a sense that at one single moment of time, Russia can just field more resources than Ukraine can and essentially break the neck of Ukrainians in that way. And just recently, I'm actually re-recording this video, but just recently, Vision Military on Twitter has actually released, let me move myself here a little bit, has released some numbers that I think are quite accurate from what I've heard from other sources. Um, there are certain contradictions that I must tell here, because I think what Vision is mentioning here as the numbers. This is the numbers that are per staffed brigades. Like, so this is kind of the general assumption of what goes into these brigades, into these units, and so on. From other sources, from other analysts that I've heard, that these numbers that are presented here, that 50,000 personnel, 400 tanks, 930 AFVs, 990s artillery systems, and 120 multiple rocket launch systems over this long front line at the top. I've heard from other analysts that actually these are not completely correct, that actually equipment wise they are not as staffed. So potentially a lot of these numbers, they're just nominal numbers presented by Vishun. But because they have been known also to report on certain things, I think we can kind of run with these numbers. What does these numbers allow Russia to do? Well, exactly what I just told you right now, that they would allow Russia to don't really allow, for example, to threaten Kharkiv. Like, we should not expect that Russia will be able to take Kharkiv. To take Kharkiv or even encircle Kharkiv, Russia would need hundreds of thousands of troops, not 50,000 for this whole northern front line. So there are multiple scenarios that I've heard. One scenario is the attack towards Sumy, that this is a possibility. Sumy is a smaller city, and it is a bit exposed. Another thing that Russia might do is they might try to kind of strike in between cities to make the logistics harder for Ukrainians. All in all, with 50,000 troops, and if we take these numbers for granted, they would be maybe able to marginally advance at some places on the front lines where the front line is probably weakest. Maybe take certain villages. These forces are not enough to take any kind of notable settlement. What these forces are telling me is that it's enough to be problematic for Ukrainians. One of the major kind of things that has been discussed is that potentially Russians could go for an attack towards Kupiansk from kind of the other direction to try to undercut this area over here and collapse the northern part over here. Or potentially they can later just move these forces to reinforce either direction. That is also a possibility. So is the attack from the north possible? If we believe these resources, then definitely some activity is a possibility. However, it's not enough. These numbers are not enough to achieve anything significant that would essentially change the scale of battlefield. Definitely not something to take any major cities like Chernihiv, Sumy, or Kharkiv. Absolutely not. At other parts of frontline, remember the general situation is that Ukraine is about 3 times by now. It used to be 5, 6 times. Now we are kind of shortened to 3 times less resources available to Ukraine than it is for Russians. So Ukrainians right now are still on defensive while Russians are attacking. There are some worrying reports coming out from Sinkivka. However, because Sinkivka has been talked about over the months and months and months and months and half a years and even years, to be honest, that it's about to fall and Russians are coming. It hasn't, and the resources are coming. So while there are certain worrying factors being discussed that Russians are trying to take over Sinkivka and collapse this Kupiansk direction, in general, for now, there is no need to panic. There is no penetration. There is no falling back for Ukrainian forces. The only thing that Russians were able to achieve is right over here. They got a little bit of a bulge closer towards the road, which is marginal. So something to look out for, but I am not expecting a Russian push just because the additional resources that Ukrainians needed are coming in. Second direction that worth mentioning is the direction around Bilohorivka. So here Russians are again trying to do certain actions towards trying to cut off this pocket, but I think they missed their window of opportunity. The initial analysis that I've heard, and I discussed this extensively with you, is that potentially Russia, after Russia captures Avdiivka, they kind of try to close this pocket over here. Then maybe they will try to focus on this pocket over here. And then they will try to close the pocket of Bilohorivka. This is not what Russia has been doing. Russia kind of just went further instead of like in a big picture, if we're looking at this. So what Russia did instead, they said, okay, we captured this part. So instead of now focusing on other parts of the front line, maybe redistribute these forces, something like to Bakhmut, and then have an additional effort, for example, to cut off Toretsk, maybe, but they didn't do it. They instead just went, okay, let's just continue pushing here. Let's just allow Russians, other groups to continue pushing here. Allow others to push around this, and then let other ones also try right now to try to close this pocket with little to no reinforcements. This, I mean, you understand it yourself, right? Russia is trying, maybe they thought that Ukraine is weaker than Ukraine actually is. Maybe they thought that what they have achieved wasn't because of luck, and now they think that Ukraine just doesn't have resources. But I think they missed their window of opportunity, and while there are reports that Russians are doing things, I again don't think that this pocket right now is being threatened, and it's just interesting to know that Russians are just going forward to this. Chasiv Yar. So this is where the big kind of discussion is happening, because Chasiv Yar is a huge fortress. There has been mentions that Putin wants to get Chasiv Yar captured by the 9th of May. I don't like to spread this narrative because usually it's unsubstituted claims, and like I've heard this all the time, there is like some kind of special date. I think this is not what's happening. I think Russians are using dates for reference points and like hopeful targets, but I don't feel that they have like, oh, we need to do something by the 9th of May. Like, we've been in this war for over 2 years, and I think we kind of, every time that someone said that it's like something must be done, first they always fail to understand, well, what if it doesn't? Does it mean that Russia stops? And no, it didn't mean that Russia stops. So I don't find this useful thinking about dates. All in all, that Russia wants Chasiv Yar. Right now, Ukrainians have said that they have kicked out Russians from the Channel district that tried to come in. Russians are now trying to go back in. Ukrainian defenders are reporting that they are pushing back, and it's really, really tough fighting, and they are having huge trouble, and majority of it is because of the aviation, and we're going to get to it in just a second. But we will see what Russia will do. The reports from certain analysts are that Russia has been mostly using the forces from certain groups, and they have been preparing like essentially additional couple of strike fists here at the back, and they want to do a two-prong attack. They are hoping that what is happening right now at Ivanyivske is you can see there is this part of Ivanyivske that Ukrainians are still holding essentially. It's more of a gray area, but it's a huge thorn in Russia's side because they cannot start encircling Chasiv Yar. They cannot start going towards the south, because as soon as they try to do even these kind of operations over here, they instantly just get sideswiped by Ukrainians that from the south, and that is very annoying for them. So right now the report is that Russia is preparing certain forces for attack, and they're hoping to use these forces in a two-pronged attack. One will be probably something like a fixing attack against Ukrainians against the Channel district, where Ukrainians would not be able then to operate, and then second, to move kind of around encirclement and put pressure on these units that are all defending this line, and also push to the Ukrainian units stuck in the Channel district to clear it out. That's the dream. The only thing that stands behind this dream, between this dream, is this part over here, and this is specifically what the units are waiting for to be captured. So the current units of the Russian offensive, they want to see Ivanivsky cleared out, and then use this highway essentially to sprout out and go to target both the Chasiv Yar direction, and also hopefully use it to go collapse the Klishivka area that they're also doing. Because in Klishivka, Russians are also renewed certain attacks, and they want to collapse it, but they have unfavorable positions here, so they cannot just, well, they don't have the resources to brute force it against Ukrainians at all. So far, it's unclear. Right now, it's a coin toss whether or not Russians will succeed. But the point that we need to tell is that Chasiv Yar for now is fine. Russians have not reached the main defense lines around Chasiv Yar, and Ukrainians are still defending very valiantly. And this is very, very good. Around the Ocheretine, the advances of Russians have slowed down. Russians basically breached the positions, and immediate areas around that, like Ocheretine is located on a hill, so once they gained the dominant position, they were able essentially to expand their effective influence from that high ground on overlapping areas around here. Ukrainian frontline fighters are reporting this, and a lot of them saying, is this bad? It's so on. This is understandable. It's never been easy. But the point is, Russians are consolidating positions mostly, and they're trying to kind of beef it up to make sure that it's not being cut off by Ukrainians. Ukrainians try to do certain things. There has been reports that Ukrainians try to counterattack Russians around the Novobakhmutivka in this direction, but Ukrainians again are lackluster on the ammunition. The good news is, and this is where we're coming back, is that most of these advances that Russia were able to do was because they had an advantage in resources, so like artillery, and this is understandable, but the most important one is the aerial bombs from the planes. And these aerial bombs have been a huge problem, because if we compare, for example, how Ukrainians were moving against Russian positions during their offensive, and they struggled a lot against deep dug-in positions of Russians, because they didn't really have anything that could, how do we say, like get Russians out of the ground. Whereas the big aerial bombs that are being dropped by planes by Russians, they are powerful enough to essentially change geography in this specific area. They are completely destroying any kind of trenches or underground structures. So given enough time, Russia is able to erode Ukrainian defenses, at least on this direction, to allow for certain advances, to allow to move forward and get into these positions and penetrate them. This has been a big problem, but we know that the resources have been coming in from the allies, and I think the main resource that is now being coming in is the anti-air systems. Most notably, there are rumors that the roaming Patriot battery is back in action, because just recently, like I think 2 days ago, we've heard that a Russian plane has been shot down. Well, they said it felt in a disaster. And just right now, basically today, as I was explaining, there's news that the Russian Su-25 plane has been also shut down around the area of Avdiivka. So it's great news, and I think this, I mean, it's technically it's speculation right now, but I think it's not a far-fetched speculation to consider that, hey, Ukraine is starting to get resources. The frontline troops are now saying that they're able to fight back, and also the anti-air forces are getting the resources they need to fight the Russian planes. All in all, we will see the drop in the Russian potential for attack, and that's great. They still have the resources, they still will be advancing, and as I say, the resources that Ukraine needs are going to be slowly now flowing in, and we will see Russians slow down, and I'm expecting them to be stopped by the end of June. But we will see. I think this kind of goes well line in line. Other than that, Russians are having little success. The only thing I would kind of mention is Robotine, because Robotine, what I just said about the aerial bombs, is basically what happened with Robotine. So there was a lot of fortifications in Robotine, but Russians have been turning these fortifications and using these aerial bombs to specifically target Robotine. So while Robotine is not easy for Russians, there is nothing to hold there. So they cannot just come in because Ukrainians are always targeting them. There is very, very strong forces in the area. However, Ukrainians cannot really hold the positions there as well, so it's effectively a gray area. So I would not expect Russians to take Robotine anytime soon, but I would not be surprised if that would happen. Also, a lot of people are asking about the Krinky situation. They were able to expand this bridgehead a little bit, and Krinky can play a major role, but only when Ukraine gets more resources. Right now, Ukraine is not in a position. It's good that they're still having their positions there. Russians are trying to stay away from that area as much as they can. They're still like pressuring them just a little bit to make sure that Ukrainians don't feel themselves too comfortable in that area. But all in all, that area is pretty far away. In other news, Ukrainians has been striking the oil depots inside of Russia, and the recent oil depot was struck, I believe, 1,400 kilometers from the front lines, which is incredible distance. And essentially, it was just a plane that the Ukraine has been buffing up with explosives and sending on a long journey. It's great way of using planes to destroy Russian economy, and I hope more will happen. Thank you so much for watching this short video. I'm sorry it released only now. I'm struggling a little bit with medical conditions. My eyes, they are in major pain, and it's really hard for me to see. I also wanted to say that if you want to receive the news, not just from the channel that I'm talking to you in the videos, but just read them as they appear, you should join our Discord. We've worked a lot, and Discord is now like a great place to receive all of the aggregated sources. Also, my mugger head has arrived for to make sure that we display that we make Ukraine great again, for sure. I hope if you've ordered it, it's gonna come to you as well soon. Have a great time, guys. I love you all. Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you next time.